I'm 3 months along, and your husband is the father, my sister, Maya, said, before the steak was even served. She didn't look at me. She looked straight at David, who dropped his fork with a sharp clatter against the china. The condensation on my wine glass felt like ice against my palm, but I couldn't move my hand. I watched a single drop of water crawl down the side of the crystal. David's face, usually tan and confident, turned the color of dry drywall. He didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. He just stared at the salt shaker like it held the secrets to the universe. My mother reached for her napkin, her fingers trembling so hard she knocked over the gravy boat. The brown liquid spread across the white linen tablecloth like a dark stain on a clean conscience. "Maya, please," Mother whispered, her voice tightening. "Not at the table. Not tonight." But Maya wasn't there for a meal. She was there for a hostile takeover of my life. Now, I want you to think about this. If your sister stood in your home and claimed your husband's child, would you throw her out into the street, knowing she's carrying your own flesh and blood? Or would you let her stay and watch her steal your life piece by piece? Most people talk about dignity until they realize that kicking out a pregnant woman makes them the villain in the family story. That's the trap. I was trapped before I even finished my drink. Maya didn't wait for me to speak. She pulled a set of keys from her pocket. Keys I recognized instantly. They were the spares to the guest house on our estate. "I already moved my things in this afternoon, Sarah," she said, her voice flat and cold. "David gave me the code to the gate. Since he's the father, he has a legal right to provide housing for his child. We've already consulted a mediator." I looked at David. "You gave her the keys?" I asked. My voice felt small, like it was coming from a different room. David finally looked up. "The trust fund, Sarah. If there's an heir, the monthly payout doubles. We were drowning in that country club debt. This was the only way to keep the house." He wasn't apologizing for the affair. He was justifying it as a business decision. I stood up, and the screech of my chair against the hardwood floor sounded like a scream I wasn't allowed to make. The room felt smaller, the walls of the dining room closing in. My sister was pregnant with my husband's baby to save a house that now felt like a prison. If I divorced him now, the trust fund would freeze and Maya would be homeless with a baby. If I stayed, I was living in a nightmare. The next morning, the sun hit the estate with a brightness that felt insulting. I went to the library. My father had built this house on old money rules, and I knew there had to be a loophole. I opened the heavy oak desk and started pulling files. I needed to find the original trust documents from 1994. I found the bank ledger for our joint account. My breath caught. 3 months ago, $60,000 had been moved to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The signature wasn't David's. It was a perfect forgery of my own. David hadn't just cheated. He was draining the well before he jumped ship. I found a sticky note tucked inside the ledger. It was in my mother's handwriting. "The transfer is done. Make sure Sarah doesn't check the mail on Tuesday." My stomach turned. My mother wasn't just a witness to the dinner drama. She was the one holding the ladder while they robbed me. "Why, Mom?" I whispered to the empty room. I walked out to the guest house. The smell of fresh paint hit me. Maya was already hanging curtains, expensive silk ones that I had bought for the master bedroom last year. She looked at me over her shoulder. "The doctor says I need bed rest, Sarah. I'll need you to start bringing my meals out here. David said you wouldn't mind helping out for the sake of the family." I looked at the prenatal vitamins on the counter. The bottle was dusty. I picked it up and checked the expiration date. It was from 3 years ago. I looked at Maya's bump. She was wearing a loose-fitting linen dress, but something looked off. When she reached up to adjust the curtain, The fabric tightened. The bump didn't move like skin. It shifted like foam. "You aren't pregnant, Maya," I said. My voice was steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Maya froze. She didn't turn around. "Don't be ridiculous. I have the ultrasound." I saw the ultrasound, Maya. It didn't have a hospital logo. It didn't even have a date. You bought it online to trigger the trust fund payout, didn't you? Maya turned around, her face twisted. She didn't look like my sister anymore. She looked like a predator that had been caught in a spotlight. "So what if I did? David needed the money to pay off his gambling debts, and Mom needed the cash to keep her charity from being audited. We all needed this, Sarah. You're the only one who has everything. Why shouldn't we take a piece?" I didn't call the police immediately. Fear is a better motivator than handcuffs. I sat in the library and watched the security feed of the guest house. Maya was pacing. She was clutching her bump like it was a ticking bomb. I opened my laptop and sent a single BCC email to our family attorney and the trust's board of directors. The subject line was, "Audit of Marital Assets." I clicked on the Find My Car app on my phone. David's Porsche wasn't at the bank. It was parked at a motel 6 miles away. The Blue Crest. My breath caught. That was the motel where Vanessa, his assistant, lived. He wasn't at the bank trying to fix the account. He was at the motel, likely packing a bag with her using the cash he'd already drained. I dug deeper into the physical files. I found a second mortgage document I had never seen. David hadn't just forged my name on a bank transfer. He had taken out a home equity line of credit. The notary stamp wasn't my mother's this time. It belonged to Maya. My sister wasn't just faking a pregnancy. She was posing as me at the bank to sign legal documents. She stole my identity. I heard the kitchen door creak. It was my mother. She looked older, her skin gray in the fluorescent light. "Sarah, please don't hate him," she whispered. "He said he'd pay back the money before you ever noticed it was gone." "With what money, Mom?" I asked. "The money he's spending on Vanessa at the Blue Crest Motel right now?" Mother froze. "Vanessa? He told me he was using the money for Maya Specialist in Switzerland." The betrayal had layers, like a rotten onion. David was lying to Maya about the money, Maya was lying to David about the baby, and they were both lying to my mother to get her to help them rob me. I felt a cold, sharp laughter bubble up in my chest. They weren't a team, they were a circle of vultures eating each other. I walked out to the guest house. I didn't knock, I used my master key. Maya was stuffing jewelry, my jewelry, into a duffel bag. "The police are at the Blue Crest, Maya," I said. "They're arresting David for fraud, and when they realize you signed those mortgage papers as Sarah, you're going to be his cellmate." Maya dropped the bag. The sound of gold hitting the floor was heavy. "He told me it was legal. He said as the father of the heir, I had signing authority." "There is no heir, Maya, and I called Marcus." Marcus's eyes went wide. Marcus was her ex-boyfriend, a man with a very violent reputation and a very short temper. "Why would you do that?" "Because Marcus thinks you stole $10,000 from him before you ran away to reconcile with me. I told him you were here and that you had the money in a duffel bag." Maya started shaking. "Sarah, please, Marcus will kill me. I'll tell you everything. I'll testify against David. Just don't let Marcus in that gate." "Then start talking," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed she had stolen from me. "Tell me where the offshore account password is kept." She pointed to a picture frame on the nightstand, a photo of us as children. I smashed the glass. Tucked behind our smiling faces was a small USB drive. This was David's insurance policy. It didn't just have the bank passwords, it had the recordings of every phone call he'd made for the last year. He was recording Maya and my mother, too. He was planning to blackmail them if they ever turned on him. I went back to the main house and waited. I didn't call the police yet. I needed David to come home and walk into the trap himself. Fear is a powerful tool, but realization is what breaks a man. I sat in the dark living room, the only light coming from the fireplace. At 9 p.m., I heard the heavy hum of the garage door. David walked in, whistling a tune I didn't recognize. He looked smug, like he'd just won a marathon. He didn't know I had the USB. The bank was a mess, Sarah. Just a glitch in the system. Everything is fine now. Let's go to bed. Is it fine, David? I asked. I hit play on my laptop. His voice filled the room, cold, calculating, and cruel. Once Maya loses the baby, we trigger the insurance payout and disappear. Sarah won't have a dime. David's face didn't just turn pale, it turned the color of ash. That's a fake, Sarah. You're being paranoid. It's not a fake, David. It's your own backup. And I've already sent a copy to the insurance company. They're very interested in the high-risk policy you took out on my sister's fake pregnancy. That's a felony, David. Federal fraud. My mother walked out from the shadows of the hallway. She was holding the heavy glass vase from the foyer. She didn't look like a victim anymore. I heard it all, David. Every word. David stepped toward her, his fists clenching. Get back in your room, Martha. This doesn't involve you. It involves my daughter, she said. Her voice didn't shake. And it involves a fact that I've already called the board. I told them you coerced my notary stamp. You're finished. David ran to the wall safe behind the painting in the study. He scrambled with the dial, his breath coming in ragged gasps. When the door swung open, he let out a choked sound. The safe was empty. I had moved the emergency cash, the passports, and the title to the Porsche 6 hours ago. He was standing in a multi-million-dollar estate with exactly $40 in his wallet. Check the infidelity and fraud clause in our prenup, David, I said, walking into the study. The one you signed without reading because you thought I was too emotional to understand business. A conviction for financial fraud against a spouse nullifies all claims to marital property. You aren't getting half the house. You're getting an eviction notice. David turned around, and for the first time, I saw the predator's mask slip. He looked desperate. Sarah, think about the baby. Maya is your sister. You can't let her go to jail. There is no baby, David, and Maya isn't going to jail. She's going to Marcus. The name made him flinch. Marcus was the man Maya had robbed before she came crawling to us. Marcus didn't use lawyers. He used a baseball bat. I picked up my phone and pressed a button on the security app. I just opened the front gate, David. Marcus's truck is coming up the driveway right now. He thinks you're the one who has his $10,000. I told him Maya gave it to you for safekeeping. You should probably run. David didn't stop to argue. He knew Marcus's reputation. He bolted out the French doors, disappearing into the dark woods behind the estate. He left his Italian leather shoes by the door and ran barefoot into the thorns. I watched him on the night vision camera until he was nothing but a flickering ghost among the trees. The house fell into a heavy, ringing silence. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea. My mother sat across from me, her eyes fixed on the empty chair where my father used to sit. "What now?" she asked. I pulled the real medical report from my pocket. Patient, Sarah. Status, 6 weeks pregnant. I didn't show it to her. Not yet. Information is power, and I wasn't ready to share mine. I opened the small wooden box my father had left me. Inside wasn't just a key. There was a letter. Sarah, if you are reading this, the man you chose has failed the test. Use the account in Zurich to buy back the shares he sold. Don't let the family name die. My father had planned for my husband's failure better than I had planned for my own marriage. There was a frantic pounding on the kitchen window. It was Maya. Her hair was a mess, and her bump was lopsided, the foam padding sticking out of her dress. "Sarah, let me in. Marcus is here. He's going to hurt me." I looked at her through the glass. You should have thought about Marcus before you slept with my husband, Maya. Sign the confession I left on the porch, and I'll call the police to pick you up. It's the only way you'll be safe from him." The blue and red lights began to flash at the end of the long driveway. I hadn't just called Marcus, I had called the sheriff, but I timed it perfectly. Marcus had enough time to scare them, but not enough time to touch them. I wanted them to feel the terror of what they had invited into my life. I watched as the deputies handcuffed Maya. She was screaming, but the sound was muffled by the thick, soundproof glass of my father's house. The next few days were a blur of lawyers and locksmiths. I had every lock in the house changed, not just the doors, but the internal cabinets, the safe, even the garden shed. I wanted a world where I held every single key. My mother moved into the guest house. She was my assistant now, handled with a strict monthly allowance. She didn't complain. She knew she was lucky to be there at all. A week later, a detective called. They found David's Porsche abandoned at a gas station 3 states away. There was blood on the steering wheel, his own, likely from the thorns in the woods, but he was gone. He had become a ghost, a man with no credit, no name, and no home. He was exactly what he had tried to make me. I sat in the nursery, the blue room Maya wanted to steal. I looked at the wallpaper. It was old, peeling at the corners. I realized I didn't want to rebuild the old life. I wanted to burn the memory of it. I hired a crew to gut the room by noon. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number from a burner phone. I answered it, but I didn't speak. "Sarah?" David's voice was ragged, broken. "I'm starving. Just send 10,000 to the old account, for the baby's sake." "There is no baby, David," I said, my voice as cold as a winter morning. Maya confessed, "I have the foam padding in the trash can. Don't ever call this number again." I hung up and blocked the line. Now here is the question that keeps me awake. I won. I have the house, the money, and the legacy. But I used my sister's terror and my mother's shame to get it. I watched my husband run into the woods like a hunted animal, and I felt nothing. Am I the hero who protected her home? Or have I just become the most dangerous person in this family? I went to check the security footage one last time before bed. I saw something I missed. On the night of the dinner, before Maya made her announcement, the camera in the foyer caught my mother and David whispering. He didn't just coerce her. She was smiling. She handed him a small vial. I looked at my teacup. My mother had made it. I looked at the medical report again. 6 weeks pregnant, but I had been feeling dizzy months, long before the pregnancy. I realized the special tea my mother made for my nerves wasn't herbal. It was a slow-acting sedative. They weren't just robbing me. They were keeping me drugged so I wouldn't notice the money disappearing. I didn't confront my mother. That would be too simple. Instead, I walked out to the guest house where she was sleeping. I took the tea canisters from her kitchen and replaced them with regular store-bought leaves. Then I changed the code on her gate again. She wouldn't be able to leave without my permission. She wanted to keep me in a fog. Now she would live in a cage of her own making. I walked back to the main house, my hand resting on my stomach. The baby kicked. Or maybe it was just my imagination. I looked at the portraits of my ancestors on the wall. They looked back with cold, judgmental eyes. I realized that to keep an estate like this, you can't have a heart. You can only have a plan. "We're going to be just fine," I whispered to the empty hallway. Just as I was about to turn off the lights, there was a soft, rhythmic knock on the front door. 3 taps. My father's old signal. My heart stopped. My father had been dead for 5 years. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. There was no one there. Only a single fresh rose laying on the mat. M.V. Maya's middle name was Rose, but she was in jail. David was gone. My mother was locked in the guest house. I realized then that the game wasn't over. Someone else was watching. Someone who knew the old signals. I picked up the rose and threw it into the fireplace. I locked the deadbolt and walked upstairs. I didn't look back.